Hello, everyone, and welcome to. Sorry about that. If you were on the line, hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I promise we won't kill your ears again, but we're going to go ahead and give people just a couple more minutes to trickle in before we get started. So sit back, relax, and we'll get started in just a few minutes. Thank you. Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, How Oracle Uses Reviews to Fuel Critical Marketing Goals. My name is Lee, and I'll be your host today. We've got Let me go ahead and change the slide. Here we go. We've got an awesome session in store for you today. So just a couple quick housekeeping things before we get started. First, this session is being recorded and a copy of it will be shared with you after the webinar. In addition, there will be a Q&A session at the end of today's session. So if you do have a question at any point during this, feel free to enter it into the chat box and we will get to as many as we can. Now, I am pleased to introduce you to today's speakers. First, we have Lauren Harris, Director of Global Customer Programs at Oracle, as well as Russ Summers, VP of Marketing at Trust Radius. We're so excited to have Lauren with us today. She is a real innovator in the realm of customer voice and a creative force when it comes to implementing and differentiating with customer reviews at Oracle. So with that, Lauren, go ahead.
Great. All right. Thank you, Lee. I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you about Oracle's Customer Review Initiative. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Can you guys go? There we go. All right. So to set the stage for this, I thought it might be helpful to understand a bit about Oracle. Oracle is a leading provider of technology and application solutions. We are one of the top 20 global brands. We have 430,000 customers and over 136,000 employees. So when we talk about customer reviews and the integration and change management aspects that I'm going to cover today, I think it's helpful to have context of size in mind. So Oracle's mission to help people see data in new ways, discover insights, and unlock endless possibilities correlates exactly with what we're doing in customer reviews, both internally and externally, by providing a different resource of information to our prospects and providing input back into the organization to foster growth. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. Through customer reviews, we harness data, content, awards, and competitive insights internally and externally with the mission to drive sales, market presence, and improve the customer experience. So let's get into that a little bit in detail. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, thank you. So why do we need customer reviews? There are macro trends at play that are changing and have changed buyer expectations and are presenting vendors with quite a few challenges to meet those new expectations. First, as we're going to hear more about from Russ in a moment, there is a trust gap, and it's getting bigger and bigger. Buyers want to trust their vendors. In fact, based on some recent research that Trust Radius did, they found that 89% of buyers don't trust their sales reps, which could be in large part due to a perceived lack of transparency, because 77% want transparency from their vendors about product limitations, but only 40% think that vendors are actually telling them about their limitations. So that trust gap in part has led to a shift in influence. Buyers aren't using sales reps and analysts near to the extent that they were. Only 24% of buyers use analyst reports during selection. And this is a pretty big disconnect because 48% of vendors are still relying heavily on analysts. And on the vendor side, only 19% said that the vendor influenced their buying decision. So part of what's driving this shift in influence are generational differences. 3 out of 5 buyers are now millennials, and they are following their own path. They use more sources of information during evaluation, and they just aren't as interested in the traditional vendor-led journey. This has all led to a new norm of buyer expectations. Rather than a trust gap, our buyers expect transparency. Rather than hearing from sales and getting vendor-sponsored white papers, they want to hear from real people that have real experiences with the solutions they're considering. And they want a simplified do-it-yourself type journey. Vendors can use reviews to meet those challenges because they offer transparency, they offer peer voice, and fall in line with those evolved expectations of a much more democratic journey. So you see here that 52% of buyers read reviews, but for many of our key target areas, the percentages are much higher, with 67% for HR and 62% for ERP buyers, just as some examples. There are, of course, many complementary solutions that a vendor can take individually to meet these unique challenges that we're being faced with. But reviews are a unique initiative in that it has the ability to meet all three. Okay, we can go to the next one. Thank you. All right, so here are some specific strategies that Oracle is using or working towards to differentiate our customer engagement. To build trust through transparency, we are prioritizing review recruitment and promoting that review content. We encourage all customers to leave reviews and believe that reviews offer a unique opportunity to be fully transparent about positive use cases, success stories, and limitations, and enable our buyers to understand if a particular solution will be effective for their needs. To build influence, we are integrating peer voice, working on getting the content into the hands of sales to build trust with buyers, and we're working to amplify review content across a variety of channels. Finally, we also want to simplify access to do-it-yourself content like reviews, demos, and trials. And we're starting to see more integration on our web properties and campaign integration as well. So using customer reviews pervasively in campaigns on our web properties and getting the content in sales hands is positioning Oracle to differentiate itself from the more traditional customer engagement experiences. It is truly a unique initiative, and that if done well, it not only allows us to meet the challenges, but through evolving how we connect with our buyers, we get to differentiate ourselves from our competitors for truly a competitive advantage. So for Oracle, we'll stay on this slide. So for Oracle, customer reviews has 4 main value props. Reviews are a fantastic path for advocacy, allowing our customers to build their social brand, connect with their peers, and provide expertise to others that may benefit from learning from somebody that's got firsthand experience. We've covered trust a good bit, so I'll only lightly touch on that one here, but one of the most significant value props from reviews is the ability to build trust and to close that gap by sharing successes and limitations. And then simplify and enhance enablement by providing content buyers want when and where they want it, and sales enablement materials, marketing campaign, and on web properties or wherever they naturally go to find information. Finally, another way that we are impacting the buyer's journey pre and post sale is utilizing feedback from customer reviews and competitive comparisons to identify themes where we need to focus to improve customer experience or the buyer's journey. I think it is very common for people just starting out to think about the review framework as more of a branding or possibly a lead gen exercise. But what we've seen and continue to develop is a much more holistic view of the potential value. When reviews are incorporated throughout and standardized in the way that we do business, from marketing to sales, advocacy, and customer experience, that's when the most value will be realized. Okay, we can go to the next one. To achieve these value props and to put the strategies discussed earlier into play, and a global B2B enterprise like ours is a momentous exercise in change management and involves the full support and buy-in from multiple lines of business and functional areas. So my team runs Oracle's customer review initiative at the corporate level across LOB, line of business. Through a team of 6, including myself, we holistically manage the program, vendors, budget, really just the infrastructure that supports the program, focusing always on the next evolution of the program. Right now, that focus is heavily aligned with integration, meaning working with the teams that you see here on this slide to understand their needs and to help them to establish processes and scalable processes and content that can be delivered that they can utilize and amplify. I see my team's role as one that continues to evolve as this market evolves. As we learn and understand more avenues for value, my team provides that centralized infrastructure and management to be able to take advantage of that value throughout Oracle. So to talk a bit about what teams we work with, product marketing and product development were our first partners in this initiative. Product marketing took ownership of the customer-facing side of customer reviews, maintaining the profile pages and leveraging review content and assets and their campaign materials, while we worked with product development to leverage the feedback and to engage with reviewers directly throughout the platforms. Sales is one of our primary focus areas, and we are working with them to use the content data in their communications, helping them to build trust and transparency with their buyers. We also work with corporate marketing, the partners team, and analyst relations and others to discover insights from the feedback that we get through the review process and recruit reviews and amplify content. So as you can see, this is a very holistic approach to this initiative and much larger than any one group alone. So to achieve the value that we've discussed, reviews are, of course, required. Can't do anything without a steady count of reviews. So in addition to focusing on change management to integrate review content throughout Oracle, we also never lose sight of just the basics of review recruitment. I have 2 team members working on recruitment, with one focused on events and the other on ongoing digital campaigns. We work closely with our vendors to constantly improve our recruitment abilities, focusing on the quality of reviews and review count, as well as event performance and ongoing improvement. From these efforts, we have over 25,000 reviews across 3 platforms, with 95% of those coming in as positive or neutral. And while the majority are from North America, 40% are not. And of those, 55% are from enterprise companies. Through these reviews, we have received 55 recognitions. All of these equate to over 25,000 potential pieces of content from reviews and 55 award assets. We can go to the next slide. There we go. We work with 3 vendors: Trust Radius, of course, our lovely host for this webinar, and G2 and Gartner Peer Insights. On the Trust Radius platform, we've achieved 10,000 Oracle ratings and reviews, the most of any of the vendors that we work with, and 15 award recognitions. They work with us continuously to discover value and to continue to mature this program. Customized reporting and product innovation that helps us scale our common initiatives and discussions that we have with the Trust Radius team. And they have been an amazing resource for our events outreach and frequently adapted their own models based upon learnings from our events. We can go to the next one. So this relationship has resulted in some fantastic results and trends. We've had over 69,000 views, and of those, over 37,000 were enterprise viewers. We're really pleased with the enterprise focus that Trust Radius has on their platform because it fits very well with our buyers. We've seen over 800 new advocates identified and a 91% growth in reviews over the last year across Oracle products. All of this growth has provided and continues to provide a strong foundation to support our value propositions for this program, which again are advocacy, building trust, enabling sales and marketing, and improving customer experience. That's it. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Russ.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I love the way you threaded the program through to talk about sort of the four pillars on that one side. It's amazing work you've done to think of this strategically rather than tactically, and I really appreciate it. What I want to dive into now is why are reviews so important to enterprise buyers? Because we often talk and hear the thought of, Yelp for business software or things like that, and yet Yelp and sites like that are short reviews for transactional purchases. Stakes in enterprise purchasing are stakes for the enterprise buyer are much, much higher, and that changes things, and we'll dive into why. First, across the market, there is a declining trust in sales and marketing, which Lauren referred to as the trust gap, and we often call it that as well. Just a year ago, there was a 29-point gap between buyers who said it was important to understand the cons before buying, and vendors who agreed that it was important for buyers to understand the cons before buying. That was a 29-point gap a year ago. It is now a 44% gap. So it's becoming no longer a trust gap, but potentially a trust chasm. And this is changing the way every buyer in the market thinks, and therefore the way every vendor must act. And it's very, very simple when you look at what buyers want. Chris from Audible states it quite clearly here. He doesn't want hyperbole, marketing, or sales speaks. He wants the good, the bad, the ugly, the pros, and the cons. He wants both. This is why for enterprise buyers, user reviews are the second most used source of information, used by 59% of buyers, which is interesting when you look at the perception that enterprise buyers may rely more on analysts, third-party references, etc. Those things do matter, but reviews are becoming their go-to for that honest picture that people like Chris want. They're used across really an enterprise when an enterprise is buying. There's another myth that is often floated that executives may not be the readers of reviews. In point of fact, 56% of enterprise execs use reviews. Now, this shouldn't really be surprising because a busy executive has relatively little time for fluff and needs to cut to the chase and understand the details very, very quickly. And reviews are crisp, succinct stories that capture the pros and cons that inform that executive quickly. This is why enterprise buyers are 64% more likely to use reviews than analyst reports. Simply, it's a simpler way to get to that full picture and more accessible, obviously. And the interesting thing, again, when we talk about Mythbusters here, is that there's a prevailing belief at times that SMB buyers are more likely to rely on reviews than enterprise buyers. And yet, and this statistic surprised me when our research proved it, the enterprise buyer is 7% more likely to use reviews than the SMB buyer. And perhaps that's because these purchases are high stakes purchases, every detail matters, and knowing if it will fit a customer like you matters. So let's look a little bit at why reviews work. Clearly they're effective. Clearly the market is consuming them. Clearly buyers are relying on them. But why? And one of the first reasons is that enterprise buying decisions are not made by a single individual. They're made by a committee with a median group size of 6 to 10 people. So it's really a small army of people that you have to convince when you are in an enterprise sales cycle. It's not your one economic buyer, it is a committee. Unfortunately, half of those committee members will not talk to you. 50% of the buying committee engages directly with vendor sales and marketing, but that means that 50% does not. They're relying on third-hand information, on the information curated for them by the rest of the buying committee, or they're relying on third-party sources. So if you want to reach those buyers, you need to make sure your customer voice is out in the market where it can be heard. And 73% of enterprise B2B buyers specifically focus on really needing to understand the cons of reviews. And this is the cons of the solution. And this is where user reviews are the #1 source of information used to really look under the hood, kick the tires, and understand what the details are. What's good, what's bad, what's the full picture. And when we say that 73% of enterprise B2B buyers need to understand the cons, I sometimes wonder what those other 27% are thinking, because 100% of the time in making a big ticket software purchase, you need to know the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's interesting to see that the research has uncovered that they're used across the entire buyer's journey. We sometimes think that perhaps reviews are used mostly in the discovery phase as people Google for results, and certainly reviews can play a prominent role in increasing your search presence. Or we think that they may be used in the final step of selection to rule out solutions that might have critical gaps. But the fact is they're used across the buyer's journey, and very dominantly during the evaluation phase, where people have assembled a bit of a short list and are now starting to trade those off against each other. So it is not a one-time asset to be found in discovery or to be used in the final selection. Think of it as a well that your potential buyers will go to again and again during their buyer journey to get more information. This means that there are really 5 things, if you sell to the enterprise, that you should focus on doing right now. The first is to be part of the conversation. It's happening. You have reviews of your software on review sites, and those are being read and influencing opinion. If you're not showing up, if you're not taking part in that conversation, you're missing out on potential buyers and on the ability to understand what those buyers are thinking. So the first step is to identify the review sites that your buyers rely on, that play to your enterprise buyers, and ensure that you have a presence there and you're monitoring what's going on and what's being said. The second is to focus on high quality review content. Again, I talked about the fact that a Yelp review for a pizza restaurant may not provide the level of detail you need to make a 6-figure software purchase. So you really should focus on ensuring that the content that you're generating, the review content you're getting, is truly going to be helpful to your buyers. And that's a absolute mantra to us at Trust Radius. It's why we reject 26% of reviews. We're very, very scrupulous about ensuring that it's an authentic review, it's valid, it's a real user, and that the quality will actually be helpful. And that's out of respect for the time of the buyer. A busy enterprise buyer cannot wade through tons of shallow reviews. They need to see the content that matters. And this fits with what buyers want. We know that 39% of buyers find the review content the most important element. What is surprising, to me as a vendor, and surprising to many vendors, we tend to focus on scores. We focus on our quadrants. We focus on our grids. We focus on our trust maps. And these things matter, but really only 16% of buyers focus on that, where 28% of vendors believe it's the most important element. So there is a clear disconnect there. And the lesson for us as vendors is to not worry about what we want, which is to score high on an artificial ratings leaderboard, but worry about what our customers want, which is, do they have rich content that helps them decide? That's what we should focus on what the customer needs. Having acquired reviews, you obviously need to put them in front of enterprise buyers, and this is where Oracle, in so many of the aspects of their program, they shine, but particularly here, they're very good about incorporating that content throughout their buyer's journey. I think this is why Laura and her team have been so effective at growing the presence and growing the footprint of reviews within Oracle and within their buyer community, because you'll see reviews integrated into web pages such as this. You'll see them used with a widget to be pushed to landing pages, so the most contextually relevant quotes can be surfaced. You'll see reviews put into sales cycles, used by sales team. Again, let's go back to her slide for a moment in our minds of the 6 groups that she tries to influence, that she focuses on ensuring the content is used throughout. She and her team are highly effective at ensuring that each of those groups is integrating the content, because value doesn't really happen until a review is put in front of a buyer, and that's one of the areas in which Oracle shines. And as I said, enabling the sales team, it's easy as a marketer to forget that really the sales team is a marketing touch point. But if you arm them with the content, it can pay such dividends for them and keep the customer journey consistent. And here you can see the ability that they take very strong advantage of in the Trust Quotes library to tag the quotes and tag the content based on the vertical, based on the company's size, based on the geography, based on themes in the review. This makes it very easy for a sales user to go in and pull a relevant quote, because what buyers want, especially at the point they're engaging with the sales team, is they want references and reassurances from buyers like themselves in similar roles, in similar companies, in similar industries. The final thing, and again, Lauren and team shine at this, is turning customers into advocates. A few things are needed to make that happen. You have to have great products, obviously, and you have to serve your customers well. But even if you do those things, they may not step up as advocates unless you ask. And so you can see a number of ways here that the Oracle team asks for that advocacy and obtains it. Obviously through email requests, asking continually, frequently, share feedback, give us reviews, tell us what you think. And it's very, very interesting that there's often a tendency to want to cherry pick a little and send those requests only to your net promoters. But in point of fact, what we see across our business is that asking all customers for reviews yields really, really strong results. As I think Lauren mentioned, in Oracle's case, 95% are positive or neutral. And even the negative ones add credibility, reassuring a buyer that the con that was just surfaced may not be one that matters too much to them. So authenticity matters here. That's what truly builds trust. So asking by email, asking through user groups and social media. If you sell to the enterprise, there's certainly affinity groups, right, where your users are exchanging tips and networking and information. That's a great place to ask for feedback. And of course, live events. There is nothing that is more fun for me than going where the customers are and going to events such as Oracle Open World here, where Oracle had a great presence with the Trust Radius team and others, gathering reviews from customers and generating those reviews and having that face-to-face customer interaction, because nothing competes with that. It was a great time, and it was one of the best presences I've seen to execute that type of thing. So with that, I will turn it back to Lee. I would like to thank you guys for listening, and again, thank Lauren for her wonderfully articulate answers, and flip it over to the audience for questions.
Yes, absolutely. Now is a great time to get your questions in. We've had a number of really good questions coming in already, but if you have anything that you'd like to ask either Lauren or Russ, now is a great time to submit that, and we'll get to as many as we can here. But I'll go ahead and start with this one, since I saw it come in a number of times, and I think this is a great question for Lauren. Do you have any best practices that you can share on how you actually drive reviews for Oracle?
Oh, absolutely. So Russ mentioned events. Events are a really big play for us in terms of our review recruitment. We're actually, I believe last year we were pulling around 80% of our reviews from events. We are working to also get a more of a 365-day a year type of a program in place where we're using ongoing existing communication so that we're pulling maybe 60-40, 60% from events and 40% otherwise. So we have a goal to actually reduce that, but events are a biggie. Now, in terms of the digital campaigns, you heard Russ mention about user groups and those types of things, but I would encourage you to consider every possible existing outbound communication that you already have in play. So don't think of this as necessarily a new ask. In fact, I would probably argue that as a completely new campaign, it probably wouldn't be as effective. I think that some of our biggest success that we've seen is when we plug it into existing communications. So it's people that, and that can be something large. It can be, some kind of outbound campaign that already exists and we're plugging it into it. It could be in support of an event, or it might not be, or it could be personal. Just simply asking someone in our references team or someone in our sales team to just go ask for a review. So I think anything can work like that. But I think the key is to just evaluate your organization for where you are already touching customers, and just go talk to all the people that own those channels and ask them to be plugged in, is what I would do. And it is what we do. So.
I love that. That's the piece that you mentioned about integration, really integrating the program in all areas. I've seen customers, and done it myself when I was a customer, integrated into support workflows. So when there is a support ticket, even there is an ask for a review there in the closed support.
Yep, absolutely.
And as a second part to this question that has come in, what about for enterprise buyers? Do those same strategies work for enterprise buyers? And then is there anything particular that triggers an enterprise buyer to write a review, or what motivates them?
I haven't noticed any difference in that. It seems to me that as long as we are using the channels that we have, because keep in mind our channels, the outbound communications that we already have in play would by nature already be targeting enterprise customers. So as long as we're plugging into the framework that Oracle has in place, we are very much so targeting enterprise. I'm trying to think, if we didn't have those channels, would there be a particular avenue that would make sense more than others? Honestly, I would have to really think about it. I feel like human nature kind of weighs heavily here, and we're human, and we're all sort of motivated by the same thing. We all like to, most people enjoy sharing their experiences with their peers. Most people like to learn from their peers, and quite a few of us want to build up our social profiles. I mean, there's a few basic human elements that I think won't matter if you're enterprise or not. So I think you would probably just handle it the same way that you would no matter what.
I would completely concur with that. It's a matter of, is the request relevant? Is it delivered through a channel that reaches the customer? Then you're likely to get a good outcome.
Yeah.
Great, thank you for answering. And here's another really interesting question. I'm curious why Oracle uses multiple review partners versus focusing on just one, as well as, how do you manage the full spectrum of reviews with the 3 sites you work with, as well as beyond those sites with other sites?
Well, it's a complicated process, but luckily we have some very good partnerships with our vendors that kind of help us enable this infrastructure that we've built. So in terms of why, when we started this program, 2 or 3 years ago now, we evaluated who was out there, like who were the leaders in this program, and basically, we came up with those 3 names. Trust Radius, G2, and Gartner Peer Insights as being the kind of the top of the game in this for starting to, really getting started on it. And now, having been in it for quite a while, I would say that each vendor has their pros and cons that we, sort of try to take advantage of to the best of our ability so that we're getting more value from the program. Whereas if we focus just on one, we wouldn't get necessarily as much value because we would lose out on that little value prop that the other offers that this one doesn't. So I think it just gives us a little bit more of a holistic approach so that we're touching all kind of avenues of value across the platforms.
No, that makes great sense. And in point of fact, our research bears that out, Lauren. Of vendors that use review sites, 80% of the vendors that use review sites use more than one. Now, there are several distinct strategies. There is using one to really double down on and using the other as peripheral. There is even spread of investment. There's several different strategies, but it really depends on where your customers are, what information they need, where you'll choose to focus most. But, in transparency, I will say that as a vendor customer, before I worked at Trust Radius, I used more than one review site. It can make sense to do so. One of the areas in which we distinguish ourselves a little bit in working with customers is we will acknowledge that fact that they probably should be on more than one, and we will work with them to establish the right strategy of how to sort of spread those bets, because the fact is this is all about going where the customers are. I believe that for enterprise customers, they're disproportionately on Trust Radius, but they are in many places, and therefore you as a responsible marketer want to be in those places where your customers are.
Yeah, absolutely. And love the transparency, Russ. That's such a good example of closing that trust gap right there.
Thank you. It's part of who we are.
And then as a follow-up to some of these questions, we've actually had a number of folks, Lauren, who have been curious about incentives. Does Oracle provide incentives to customers who write reviews? And do you find that to be a successful way to encourage reviews?
Oracle does not provide incentives. However, our vendors working with Trust Radius and G2, especially when we do events, do provide incentives for the reviews to come in. The only thing that we do directly is at events, if we happen to be working at a booth or what have you, we will have some kind of giveaway, something fun and attention getting so that we can compete with all the many, many flashy lights that go on at these events. So, we try to hold our own on that one, but no, we don't, there is no Oracle gift card being issued or anything like that.
Yeah, and we've done a fair amount of research on that and found that actually incentives done properly, they don't skew results positive or negative. They ensure a more even distribution. But the core is very similar to what you said about having some swag, something fun to give away to interest people. This is about catching people's attention, as all marketing is, and giving them a chance to tell their story. And the truth is, for most reviewers, the opportunity to tell their story matters more than any incentive.
Okay, great. We're again having so many great questions coming in. Thank you all for asking these really insightful questions. I'm going to go ahead and just pick one more. And if I don't get to yours, I apologize. We will reach out to you directly after this to answer the question. And also, you're welcome to contact either Lauren or Russ on Twitter or LinkedIn with whatever you may have as well. So last one I'll ask, how did Oracle and your department get started with reviews, and why was that the right choice?
Well, I would say that when it got started, we were really in a time where we were trying to innovate. We were trying to find what's next. How do we improve customer experience? How do we improve the journey? What are we not doing as an organization? Like, what should we be looking at? So this was one of the things that kind of popped up. Now, I would say that if I could start over and know and have the same knowledge, and so this would apply to pretty much anybody that's just getting started, I think that there is a huge advantage in really understanding the full value prop that you get out of this program. So even though I know it's very tempting and likely logical to start very small, I think that if I were starting over today, the first thing I would do is to really look at my entire organization and think about every main group and say, how could they, in some optimal world, how could they use something from this, whether it's content or data or feedback or whatever it might be, and really start, like when you build that initial plan, begin to already think about how you would envision this going in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. Because if we had done that, we could have already been where we are today a year ago. So it's definitely it was a very much of an evolving learning process, very much so. Along with you guys, I would say, Lee and Russ, because I feel like the market has changed significantly from the time that we got into this and the way that everybody's viewing this type of a program. So for anybody just getting started today, they kind of have a nice advantage because there's sort of some examples out there to kind of follow along. So.
Well, and you've done a great job of, providing those learnings, and I love your generosity in sharing them on the webinar today. I'll just say that the fact that you started earlier than some puts you ahead because it's reached a point where it's a must-have in the market, not a nice-to-have. And I think, Oracle, thanks to your leadership, is well equipped to lead in the area because you've got those learnings under your belt, while some others may be struggling to catch up. So appreciate your leadership there, and thank you for sharing your insights today.
Yeah, and then
thank you, Russ.
So there's one more great question that came in last minute. I'm sorry, I'm going to throw one more in there, but we do see this question come up a lot. What is a best practice? How do you handle those negative reviews, Lauren? What's your process there?
Oh, I love this question. I love it. Okay, so it sort of died off now, but I would say for a good year, I got so much, I won't call it heat, but I received quite a bit of internal feedback, concern over negative reviews. So to be concerned over negative reviews is a very common feeling, but, and Russ mentioned this a few months ago when he was going through some of the stats that they found in the research that they did, but the negative reviews are okay. They are okay to have. People look for them. The best way I think of it for myself is when I'm on Amazon or shopping. If I see 5-star, 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 I think it's spam. It's something, they've done something. I don't even know what they've done, but somehow they've gotten rid of everybody that was, wanting to say anything bad about it. So first off, I want to make that very clear that I am a big believer in having a few negative reviews or having a positive review that has some cons in it, or a neutral review that has some limitations, is totally okay, and not even just okay, it is needed. Now, in terms of how you handle them, I think that depending on what type of, we actually built a framework. We built a response framework depending upon the type of review that we're talking about, because there's all different types. You could have a positive review that just has like a couple of negative statements. You could have an outright nasty review, or you could have a neutral review that has a couple. And I think depending on which one, you have to figure out where to take them. Some of them, honestly, I wouldn't respond to, and we don't, because, if they are really particularly negative. But the ones that are trying to be constructive and they have, possibly feedback or just simply are saying, I really liked this, but this was terrible, there's nothing wrong with that. So we might reach out to them and encourage them to visit our Cloud Customer Connect community, where they can learn more about our products, connect with their peers, and try to figure out a solution. We might tell them to go to customer support, enter a ticket. Just depending on what it is. But we try to route those internally so that somebody's responding in some way, depending on what it is.
I love that. I answer the question myself when I hear that in two ways. As a buyer, I try to figure out, was this a buyer like me? Did they have my concerns? Maybe it didn't work for them because they're in a different industry. So as a buyer, just like as an Amazon shopper, Lauren, you would look at the cons and go, how much do I want to weight this? I do that as a buyer. As a vendor, I love that you have a response framework. And I'd say the critical thing is to respond. And there's two types of responses. There's the external response, which with Trust Radius, you can leverage follow-up requests in the platform to make that a little bit easier for you. So there's a response to them to say, thanks for your feedback. I really appreciate your honesty. There's also the internal response, which is sometimes this is great product feedback to take back to the product team and say, we've discovered a limitation. This would make this customer really, really happy if we could do this. And there are success stories of people that have gotten a negative review, made some product alterations, and then gone back out to that customer and have the customer be publicly delighted that, wow, you heard me and you fixed my issue. Because at the end of the day, what customers really want is to be listened to.
Yeah, Totally agree.
Awesome. Yeah, great answers to all those questions. Thank you, Lauren and Russ, for jumping in on those. And I apologize if we weren't able to get to your question. I promise one of the lovely presenters we have here today will reach out to you with an answer. And thank you so much for all your great questions and overall for joining us here today. We hope this has been a helpful session full of inspiring content that you can take back to your own review programs, to your everyday and your customer voice journey. Again, if we didn't get to your question today, we will reach out personally. And if you do have any other thoughts or questions throughout the day or tomorrow, next week, whatever, feel free to reach out to either of our speakers on Twitter or LinkedIn. You can find their contact information right here. Also, as a reminder, you will receive a recorded copy of this session, so keep an eye on your inbox. That should be arriving about tomorrow. And again, thank you so much again for listening in with us today, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Lee.
Bye.
Thanks, Ross.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.